All right, let's jump right in today. We're tackling IP protection in China. It's a jungle out there, right? You've got this amazing product or a design or some incredible tech, and then boom, someone in China is trying to rip you off. What do you do?
Well, first off, don't panic. It's a common problem, but there are ways to fight back.
So what's the first line of defense?
Often, it's a cease and desist letter. It's basically your way of saying, hey, stop that. You're infringing on my rights.
Okay, so we Google cease and desist template, translate it into Chinese, and we're good to go, right?
Not so fast. Using a generic template is a huge mistake in China.
Really? Why is that?
Think about it. In Western culture, we're all about directness, right? But in China, it's all about saving face, preserving harmony. Sending a bland, impersonal letter can be seen as a sign of disrespect, like you don't even care enough to address them properly.
So we need to be more tactful.
Exactly. You need to strike a balance. You're firm, you're asserting your rights, but you're also showing respect, emphasizing the desire for a peaceful resolution.
Okay, so no generic templates. What else do we need to keep in mind?
Citing specific Chinese IP laws is crucial. Don't just throw around vague legal terms. You need to show them you understand the legal landscape.
So if we're talking about, say, a trademark issue, what would that look like?
You'd want to reference the trademark law of the People's Republic of China, specifically articles like 59 and 63, which deal with infringement and remedies.
Okay, got it. So we've ditched the template. We're speaking their legal language. When do we bring in the big guns, like an actual lawyer?
A lawyer's letter can definitely amplify your message. It shows you're serious, you're willing to take legal action. Plus, having a Chinese law firm involved can really smooth the communication process.
Makes sense. So it's like bringing in a translator, a legal expert, and a cultural advisor all rolled into one.
You got it. And the psychological impact can be huge.
All right, lawyer's letter. Check. Now let's break down the cease and desist letter itself. What are the must-haves for making it effective in China?
Well, first and foremost, it has to be in Chinese.
No shortcuts there.
None whatsoever. It's a matter of respect, and it ensures clarity. You wouldn't want to receive a legal document in a language you couldn't understand, would you?
Fair enough. So we've got the language down. What else?
You need to clearly explain which specific IP laws have been violated. Don't just name drop the law. Explain how their actions directly violate those specific articles or provisions.
Okay, so we're getting granular with the legal code. What about proof?
Absolutely. You need evidence, photos, screenshots, sales records, anything concrete that supports your claims.
So we're building a rock-solid case file. We've got the law, the evidence, the cultural context. What about telling them what we want them to do?
Ah, yes, your demands and deadlines. Be crystal clear.
So we're not messing around here.
Exactly. State the specific actions you expect, whether it's ceasing production, removing content, or whatever it may be. And set a firm deadline. No wiggle room.
Okay, no wiggle room on the deadline. But what if they just ignore our letter?
You need to make it clear that there will be consequences. State that you're prepared to take further legal action. Administrative complaints, litigation, working with local enforcement, lay it all out.
So we're setting expectations, showing we're not afraid to escalate. But hold on. What if we send this perfectly crafted letter to the wrong person or company?
That's a great point. You need to be absolutely sure you're targeting the right entity.
It's like sending a pizza to the wrong address. Doesn't matter how good the pizza is, it's not going to help. So how do we make sure our letter lands on the right desk?
Thorough research. China's National Enterprise Credit Information Publicity System is a good starting point. Online platforms, industry directories, even social media can help you track down the right people.
And I imagine it can get tricky with subsidiaries and parent companies.
Definitely. That's where having a legal expert who understands those structures can be invaluable.
So we've covered the legal nuts and bolts. But we can't forget about the cultural side of things, right? How do we make sure our letter is both legally sound and culturally sensitive?
It all goes back to that idea of face. Remember, avoid confrontational language. Aim for that indirect yet firm approach.
Like a delicate dance, finding that balance between strength and diplomacy.
Precisely. You're asserting your rights while respecting their cultural norms.
Okay, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, any final words of caution?
Even with the most carefully crafted letter, there are risks. The infringer might try to destroy evidence or even hit back with countersuits.
So it's a chess game. We need to be thinking a few steps ahead.
Exactly. Be prepared, be strategic. And of course, having experienced IP lawyers on your side can make a world of difference.
Okay, gather evidence first, send the letter second. Got it. So we've covered why those generic templates are a no-go, the power of a lawyer's letter, and the key elements of a cease and desist that actually works in China. But what about combining those approaches? Could sending both a cease and desist and a lawyer's letter create an even stronger message?
That's a great question, and it's a strategy we'll dig into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll explore the pros and cons of this dual approach and when it might be the most effective way to go.
All right, welcome back. Last time, we talked about laying down the law, sending that cease and desist letter, and maybe even having a lawyer back you up with a more official letter. But what if the infringer just keeps on infringing? What are your options for actually enforcing your rights in China?
Yeah, because sending a letter is one thing, but actually getting them to stop, that's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah.
So what happens when those infringers just ignore you? What can you actually do?
Well, you've got a few options. One path is to go through the authorities, file an administrative complaint.
Okay, so we're not talking about calling the cops, right? Who are these authorities?
It depends on what kind of IP we're talking about. For trademarks, you'd go to the State Administration for Market Regulation, or SAMR for short. They handle everything from trademark registration to cracking down on counterfeits. Say now. Got it. So, if we find someone selling fake sneakers with our logo, we call SAMR. What about, say, patent infringement?
For patents, you'd probably want to file a complaint with the National Intellectual Property Administration, or CINA. They're responsible for patent protection and enforcement.
CNA for patents. Okay, what about copyright? Like if someone's using our music or our designs without permission?
For that, you'd likely be dealing with the National Copyright Administration of China, or NCSC. They're the ones who handle copyright issues.
Okay, so we've got SAMR, CNTA, and NCAC. Got it. But how do these agencies actually work? What's the process like?
Well, you can't just send them a casual email. Each agency has its own specific procedures for filing a complaint. You'll need to put together a strong case.
So what does that involve?
Gather your evidence, proof of your IP rights, like your trademark registration or patent certificates, details about the infringing activity, where it's happening, who's doing it, how big the operation is, documentation like emails or invoices.
So it's like building a legal case file.
Exactly. And you'll typically submit all of this through their online platforms.
Okay, online submission. Got it. So we submit everything, and then what? We just wait.
The agency will review your complaint and decide whether to investigate further. This can take some time, so be patient. If they decide to move forward, they'll typically contact both parties and gather more evidence.
So they act as a kind of neutral investigator.
In a way, yes. They're trying to determine if infringement has actually occurred.
And what if they rule in our favor? What can these agencies actually do?
They have a range of options. They might issue warnings, order the infringer to stop, or impose fines. In some cases, they can even confiscate counterfeit goods or shut down websites.
So there's a scale of actions depending on how bad the infringement is. It's not always about going straight for the most extreme measures.
Exactly. And administrative actions can be pretty efficient, especially compared to going to court, which can take much longer and cost a lot more.
Okay, so that's the administrative route. But what if that doesn't work, or the infringement is just so blatant that we need to take it further? What about actually suing them?
If you need stronger remedies, litigation might be the next step, taking them to court.
Okay, court. That sounds intense.
It can be a complex process, but it allows you to seek stronger remedies. Things like a court order to stop the infringement permanently, financial compensation for your losses, maybe even a public apology from the infringer.
So higher stakes, but potentially higher rewards too.
Exactly. And in China, you'd typically file your lawsuit in a specialized intellectual property court. They have judges who are experts in IP law.
So we're not just going to any random court.
Right. You want your case to be heard by judges who understand the nuances of IP law.
Okay, that makes sense. So let's say we file our lawsuit and now we're in court. Is it like what we see in the movies with big dramatic arguments and surprise witnesses and stuff?
It's not quite like Hollywood. Chinese legal proceedings are a bit different. It's much more focused on written submissions and evidence.
Less drama, more paperwork. Got it. So we present our case, they present theirs, and then the judge makes a decision.
Exactly. And if you win, the judgment might include that injunction to stop the infringement, damages, maybe even that public apology we talked about.
So a court judgment carries some serious weight. It's not just a slap on the wrist.
Right. It sends a clear message that they broke the law and have to face the consequences.
Okay, so we've got administrative actions, we've got going to court. Are there any other options?
Don't forget about local enforcement agencies. They can be really effective, especially in cases involving counterfeit goods.
Okay, so this is where we get into like actual raids and seizures.
Exactly. These agencies can conduct raids, seize counterfeit products, shut down factories or warehouses.
Wow, so they can actually go in and physically stop the infringing activity. But how do we get them involved?
This is where having experienced IP lawyers who have good relationships with these agencies can really make a difference.
So it's about knowing the right people, having those connections.
It can be very helpful.
Okay, so we've got administrative complaints, going to court, and working with local enforcement agencies. That's a lot of options. How do we know which one is the right one?
There's no one-size-fits-all answer. The best approach depends on the specifics of your case, the type of IP, how bad the infringement is, your evidence, your budget, your goals. It's all about having a strategy.
Right, so we need to think carefully about our goals and the best way to achieve them. But honestly, all of this sounds pretty reactive, like waiting for someone to infringe and then taking action. Wouldn't it be better to stop it from happening in the first place?
100%. And that's something we're going to delve into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll talk about how to proactively protect your IP, making yourself a much less appealing target for infringers.
All right, welcome back. So in the last two parts, we've been talking about what to do when someone's already infringing on your IP in China. But as they say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Exactly. It's always better to be proactive, make yourself a less appealing target in the first place. Think of it as building a fortress around your IP.
Okay, so how do we start building this IP fortress? Where do we even begin?
Well, the foundation is registration. It might seem obvious, but you'd be surprised how many companies skip this step.
Really? I mean, it seems pretty basic, right? Why wouldn't you register your IP, especially in a place like China?
Some companies think that if their IP is protected in, say, the US or Europe, it automatically extends to China. But that's not how it works. You need to register it specifically in China to have legal protection there.
So trademarks, patents, copyrights, all that good stuff. But isn't that registration process a bit of a headache in China?
It can be, yeah. That's why having experienced IP professionals on your side is so important. They know the ins and outs of the system, can help you navigate all the paperwork and procedures.
Okay, so find a good guide, someone who knows the ropes. Got it. Let's say we've got everything registered. What's next?
Now it's time to keep an eye on the market. You need to be actively monitoring for any potential infringers.
So we're basically becoming IP detectives, constantly on the lookout.
Pretty much. Check online platforms, industry publications, go to trade shows. You can even subscribe to specialized monitoring services that will track all this stuff for you.
All right, so we're monitoring, and suddenly we spot an infringer. Red alert. Do we immediately lawyer up and fire off a cease and desist?
Not so fast. Sometimes it makes sense to try a more diplomatic approach first. Reach out, try to negotiate a solution.
So see if we can resolve it amicably before things get legal?
Exactly. You might be surprised how often this works. Sometimes the infringer isn't even aware they're doing anything wrong.
Okay, so we try the nice approach, but they're not budging. They're determined to keep infringing. What then?
Then it might be time to consider those enforcement actions we talked about in the last part. Filing a complaint with the authorities, going to court, working with local enforcement.
Right. But this time, we're in a much stronger position because we've already registered our IP and gathered evidence of the infringement.
Exactly. Being proactive gives you a huge advantage when it comes to enforcement.
Okay, so registration, monitoring, and attempting to resolve things peacefully first. What else can we do to strengthen our IP fortress?
Contracts, contracts, contracts.
Ah, yes, the dreaded legal paperwork.
I know it's not the most exciting part, but it's essential. When you're working with partners in China, make sure your contracts are crystal clear about IP ownership, usage rights, everything.
No room for ambiguity.
Right. And get those contracts reviewed by lawyers who understand both Chinese law and international business.
Okay, so ironclad contracts. Got it. Anything else?
Don't forget about your own team. Employee training and internal policies are crucial.
So we need to make sure our own people are on board with protecting our IP.
Absolutely. Educate your employees about the importance of IP, how to handle confidential information, what the company policies are. Build a culture of IP awareness and respect within your organization.
That makes sense. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Registration, monitoring, contracts, employee training, and of course, knowing when and how to enforce your rights if someone does try to infringe. It's a lot to keep in mind.
It is, but the main takeaway is you can protect your IP in China, Don't be intimidated. By being proactive, strategic, and working with the right people, you can really minimize your risk and set yourself up for success.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to navigate this challenging but incredibly important landscape.
And one final thought. Building relationships with local partners and experts is invaluable. They can give you those on-the-ground insights, help you stay ahead of the game.
Great point. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into IP protection in China. Thanks for joining us.
We hope you found this information useful. Keep learning, keep innovating, and remember, protecting your IP is an investment in your future success.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.